Okay, ready to go. So welcome everybody. Just like to say good luck if you have your test coming up in the next couple of weeks, or maybe even this weekend. Hopefully this will be helpful for your speaking. So we're looking at the part 3 particularly here, most important part of the speaking. Okay, it's the part where the examiner really makes their final decision on your level. So it's very important to give full answers, complete answers, answers that are well structured. And we're going to look at all of those different things today. Okay. So we're going to look at the kinds of questions that they ask you. We're going to look at ways that you can give a coherent answer. And specifically, we're going to be looking at the topic of food today. So there'll also be, some vocabulary related to food. Okay. Let's just do a very quick overview of the part 3. So it's a question and answer session. It's always on abstract questions. Okay. So this is the only part of the speaking. It's not about you personally or your culture, but it is about things generally. Okay. It's always on the same topic as the part 2, but again, it's an abstract way of looking at it rather than a personal way of looking at it. And generally there's kind of 2 areas that they will look at, and probably 2 or 3 questions in each of those areas. Okay. So let's have a look at a typical question. So there's always the same script that the examiner uses. Yes, it's the same, Elio, exactly the same. Doesn't matter whether you're doing general or academic. So the examiner will say, we've been talking about whatever the part 2 was, and now I'd like to ask you 1 or 2 more general questions related to this or about this. Okay. So let's think about the kind of questions that the examiner might ask you. A very good exercise with the part 3 to practice for the part 3 is to try and think of the kinds of things that the examiner might say, and then how would you answer those kinds of questions. Okay. And remember, they're not personal, they're always abstract. Okay. So we're going to look at the different areas. Remember, he would ask you questions on 2 specific areas related to food. So here we've got sort of different types of food. Could you think of some questions related to that the examiner might ask you in the part 3? Remember that it's got to be general, not personal. Okay. Okay, so very good. What makes a good restaurant? Okay, we're going to look specifically at restaurants. Okay, what are the most popular foods in your country? That could be something. Okay, maybe you talk about cuisines. Yeah. Okay, yeah, why people like to eat that. Maybe asking about foreign food or traditional cuisine. Yes, Pollyanna, I think that's very good. I think, and Prakash, healthy food, unhealthy food, that's a very typical area to look at. Why do people eat unhealthy food when they know it's unhealthy for them? Changes people need to make. Yes, that's very good. Okay, eating habits, Sky, exactly. Okay. Oh yeah, Muskan, the popularity of fast food. Is fast food more popular, traditional foods more popular, that kind of thing. Okay, very good. So the next one, we've got a picture of a restaurant. So what kind of questions might they ask you related to that? Okay. Vietnamese street food, yeah. Very, very nice. But yes, what kind of things might they generally ask you? Okay, different types of restaurant, differences between different restaurants in different countries. That's very good. Yeah, why do you go to the restaurant for special occasions? Things like that. Very good. Olivia, why would you go to the restaurant rather than eating at home? Alexis has the same question. Okay, good. Yeah, different types of restaurants. Okay. So those would be the kinds of things that they would ask about related to restaurants. Okay. But again, remember, abstract questions, not personal questions. Okay. What about supermarkets? What kind of general questions might they ask about supermarkets? Okay, that's a nice one, Charisse. Is it good to spend on expensive restaurants? Are expensive restaurants worth it? Okay. What kind of, okay, yeah, maybe something to do with how popular supermarkets are, maybe comparing them, shopping trends in the new era, Prakash. Very, very good, yeah. Okay, we've still got getting a few personal questions here. Okay, Tajiri, that's really nice. Why do people buy groceries in supermarkets instead of open markets? So I think a lot of things like the differences, yeah, Olivia, supermarkets versus online shopping, markets versus groceries. Okay, yeah, different type of products that you can get, okay. Yes, so a lot of comparisons, things like, I'd probably say organic, Marta. I think maybe that's, if you know, so maybe you talk about organic products in supermarkets, pros and cons of shopping online, Charisse, very, very nice. Yeah, eco-friendly products, okay. And the last one is then more about agriculture. So what kind of questions do you think the examiner might ask you? Okay, very good, Sonia. GMO foods, industrial food. Can you think of any other areas that might be? Okay, very good. Organic or chemicals. Okay, why are people drawn to organic food, Tajiri? That's a very nice question. How important is agriculture in your country? Also, technology and food. Okay. Is agriculture affected by climate change? Tulgador, very, very nice. Yeah, traditional modern architecture, supporting local farmers versus, you know, importing food, machinery, that kind of thing. Okay, very, very good. We've got a really good range now of abstract questions, okay? So very likely, if in your part 2 you were asked to describe a restaurant you went to, that you would then be asked about 2 different areas. I think healthy diet, restaurants, supermarkets, or agriculture. Okay, so again, good practice. Think about the kinds of questions that you might be asked and the kind of areas, abstract areas, that could be related to the personal questions in part 2. Okay, so I'm going to look now again a bit more closely at this personal versus abstract. So if we look at that question, what kind of food do you like? Is that a part 1 question or a part 3 question? Okay, good. Yeah, very much part 1 personal question. Okay, so it's definitely not the kind of thing you're going to get asked in part 3. So if we're talking about kinds of foods, what might be a part 3 version of that question? Okay, yeah, what kind of food? Yeah, so a more general one. What do people prefer to eat? Okay, kinds of foods that are popular now. Very good. So it might still be about your culture or your country. Yes. What makes food desirable, Ermak? I like that. Very, very nice. Okay. Yeah. So again, we've gone through what are some popular foods in your country. Okay. So think about that, the change from the personal question to the more abstract question. Okay, similar one here. So a part 1 question could be, how do you choose which restaurant to go to? How might we make that a part 3 question? Okay, that's a good question, Manpreet. I think, yeah, vegetarian diets, that's probably quite a popular. Yeah, very good, Alexis. How do people choose a certain restaurant? Why do people go to the restaurants? Yeah. So we've done the same thing. Why do people go to different types of restaurants? Yes, good, Sahana. What kind of restaurants are preferred? Very good, Nutadon. What could be a factor in choosing a certain restaurant? Okay. Okay. And then we've got here, do you prefer eating in a restaurant or cooking at home? So a personal question. And if we thought about that in terms of a part 3 answer, What could be a part 3? Is it better to eat at home, Radoslava? Yeah, very good. Which one do people prefer? Okay. How often do people, yeah, so we got some good ones. Why do people prefer to eat out these days? Okay, very good. And again, we've got one about the country, so which is more popular in the country? Okay, Imak, what are the differences between home cooked food and restaurant food? I think that's a very good question. Or is it healthier, Manpreet? Those are the kind of things that you would definitely get asked. Okay. So in this one, we've got a kind of a change over time, but it's still a part 1 question. So what kind of question about changes over time might we ask in the part 3? Okay, yeah, exactly, Mohammed. Hi, Mohammed. So yeah, we're making a comparison here. Okay, very good. How has food preparation changed over the past decades? Why do people's foods taste change? Very good, Tolgador. Okay, and Sky. Okay, yeah, very good. And how is it changing in your country now? That's very good. Innovations in the food sector, Sahana, excellent. Very, very nice. Okay. So yeah, basically making a comparison between the past and the present. Okay. All right. And then in this one, we're looking forward to the future. So in a personal way, we're just asking what do you plan to have for dinner tonight? But if we wanted to turn that into a more abstract way of talking, okay, what do you think? Okay. Okay, some people are just giving me some foods. It's quite nice. What would you think about so how do you think the diet will change, Sky, exactly, in the future? Remember, we're looking forward to the future here. Okay, innovations. I think we're more talking about the future, rather than dinner, perhaps. So I don't focus too much on the dinner part, focus a bit more on the future part. What kind of questions could you ask about the future of food? Okay, very nice, Olivia. How will technology change people's eating habits? How will food look in the future, Marta? Exactly. Okay. So we're focusing on the future here, not on the, when will people stop eating food? Okay. Yeah, so how do you think our eating habits will change in the future? Yeah, how will people eat? Okay. So those are some of the kinds of questions that, you might get asked in the part 1, and then also in the part 3, how they might look, and they might be more abstract. Okay. And one more. So what do you think about fast food? Or like, do you eat fast food would be a part 1 question. But what could you ask about fast food in the part 3? What kinds of maybe opinion questions might you ask? Okay, very nice. Why is it very big, but very, very bad, but still a big industry? How is it affecting people? Yeah, junk food and health, fast food and health. What are the effects of the fast food culture, Shakil? Very nice questions. Why are fast food so praised? Okay, really nice questions we've got coming up here. Okay, this is great. I think everybody's really got the idea of the abstract questions for part 3. Okay, how is it ruining human health? Very good. So make sure that, when you answer the part 3 questions, you don't answer personally, you answer generally, you answer in an abstract way. You shouldn't be talking then about personal experience anymore. Okay. So what we had there was actually, we had a variety of questions that we were looking at. And whatever the topic is that you get asked about in part 3, could be education, could be tourism, could be food, but there are certain types of questions that you will be asked, which will usually be the same. And those types of questions have types of answers that you can always give and phrases that you can give in your answer. Okay, so if you look there on the left-hand side, we have, I think, most of the different questions. Okay, So again, any topic, the questions the examiner asks you in part 3 will fit into one of those categories, okay? So let's match those together. So the one about fast food, what kind of question is that? What are we doing there? Okay, yeah, very good. So asking you to give an opinion, making a statement, do you agree, or asking you what you think about something. Okay, what about the second one? Okay, very good. So making a comparison, very, very common type of question in the part 3. Okay, how about the next one? Okay, yeah, past and present, and it is a different type of comparison, yeah, so comparing the past to the present or talking about changes over time. Okay, how about the next one? Okay, very good, giving reasons for something. Okay, next one would be, okay, very good, describe. And then the one that we were looking there at the end is speculating about the future. Okay, so you can think of pretty much any topic, and you would have questions. So if it was education, they might say, how has education in your country changed over the last 50 years? What do you think the classroom of the future will look like? What kinds of subjects are offered in your country, and it's always the same kinds of questions. So it's good to know those questions and know how to answer them. Okay, so now we're going to look at that, how you answer those different types of questions. So this one is not a very good answer. Can anybody tell me what's lacking in that answer that the examiner would probably lose marks from that? Okay, yeah. Abstract answer, yes, okay, I think Mohammed got there, or the linking. There's no linking phrases, so it's not clear what's going on. They're not introducing their ideas in any way. Yeah, so it's very general and it's not clear what they mean, okay? So it's very important to use these kind of linking expressions, just like you do for writing, but generally they're different linking expressions. You have to use the speaking ones, not the writing ones. Okay, so we've got different signposting expressions there. I think it's because, so you're giving an opinion and giving a reason. Okay, that's the main reason why. So it's very clear, what you're saying in each of those sentences. And it's exactly the same as when you write, when you do your essay for the writing. If you don't put in linking phrases, the examiner doesn't know what you're saying until he gets to the end of the sentence, and then he has to go back and read it again. Same thing with the speaking. It's very important, coherence as well as fluency. Okay, it's a lot of people, they think that first category is just fluency. It's actually fluency and coherence. So you have to give well-structured, easy to follow answers. And one of the best ways of doing that is using linking phrases, okay? But the right kind of expressions for speaking, not the kind of ones that you would use in our writing, okay? So yeah, part 3 is very much about giving your opinion, Elio. That's generally what they're asking you, is your opinion in different aspects like future, past, present, okay? We're going to do some practice on it now, Shakil, okay? So can anyone give me any other, I think somebody put as a result up there. Can anyone think of any other linking expressions or signposting expressions? Okay, yeah, in other words, for that reason. Okay, good. So, yeah, moreover is a bit more like what you would write. Okay, I believe that. Yes, supposing. Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, we've got a huge range. However, I believe, due to, you bet. Yeah, that's why. Okay, I honestly believe. Very nice, Ali. Yeah. Okay, as a matter of fact, very good, Olatabi, as far as I'm concerned. So remember, you know, speaking ones, some of the ones you use in writing, like moreover or furthermore, they don't really work when you're speaking. They're a bit too formal. Okay, but yeah, something like in fact, Amal, is something that we use all the time. Okay, so what we have here is we have those different types of questions that we looked at a moment ago. So opinions, comparisons, and I'm going to give you some phrases, and I want you to tell me to match that phrase to the different type of question. Okay, so you can just give the number to make it easier. Okay, so if I said absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Okay, very quick, Mohammed, very good. That's definitely giving an opinion. Okay, what about the second one? Okay, yeah, very good. Mohammed's on the ball today. Okay, so you're describing, you know, different foods in your country, different systems, something like that. What about the next one? Okay, very good. So we're talking about changes in time. Okay, and the next one? Okay, very good. Definitely speculating about the future. Okay, next one. Okay, good. Very much a comparison. Next one. Okay, great. So that's the reasons. What about the next one? People will. Okay, very good. And he, yeah, it was a bit tricky, that one. Yeah, I very much doubt that people will. We often use doubt when we're talking about the future, okay? Or I doubt that, or undoubtedly. Okay, I'd have to say it's because, okay, yeah, okay, so again, giving the reason for something. Okay, some key differences. Okay, very good, a comparison. And what about that one? Yeah, okay, that's description, which is often the first question that they ask you, okay? Okay, however, and then we compare, very good, okay, comparing past and present, and then, okay, very good, yes, okay, so a more tentative agreement. So these are the kinds of things we're talking about when it comes to the speaking. It's quite different from the writing, but you know, you're always introducing your ideas very, very clearly. So tell the examiner what you're going to say. Yeah, there are a number of advantages and disadvantages related to this. I would say the biggest disadvantage, etc., etc. So, you know, it's everything's very clear. Don't make the examiner work to understand what you're saying. Make it easy for them, and you'll get a great score for fluency and coherence. Okay. So let's look now a little bit beyond that. So that's how you will introduce your answer. Use a very clear phrase to introduce your answer, depending on the type of question that the examiner asks you. And remember that whatever the subject, the types of questions are always the same, okay? So let's look a little bit more about what happens after you've introduced your answer. So this is one of the ones we looked at before about the fast food. So of those 6 categories, which type of question is this? Okay, perfect. Yes, so this is an opinion answer. So you're going to start by giving your opinion, but that's not going to be a complete answer. You need to then add, again, a bit like the writing, you need to add supporting evidence. You need to add a bit more information to get a good score for fluency and coherence. They want you to give a complete answer. Okay, so that would be, you know, introduction and then supporting evidence. Okay, so we have a little mnemonic here for this one. So areas, different areas to talk about. So you answer the question using the expression that relates back to the type of question that it is. And then you can use all or some of these examples. Okay, again, it's quite like the paragraphing in the essay. Examples, reasons, other ways of thinking about it, and then some way of wrapping it up at the end, so it's quite clear to the examiner that you're finished, and then he can move on or she can move on to the next question. Okay, that's enough. You don't have to keep talking forever. I think, again, that's a mistake sometimes people make. They want you to give a full answer or a complete answer rather than just a long answer. And sometimes what happens is people then, because they want to say more, they start going back and actually saying the same thing again and going round in circles, which is very, very confusing. So say what you want to say. 4 or 5 sentences, I would say. Doubt that you need to say more than that. And then, you know, you can move on to the next question. That's a complete, you could stop at area. Yes, you could definitely stop. I mean, this is an example, but you know, you don't necessarily have to summarize. Okay. Again, if you keep talking, you know, the examiner is just going to stop you and ask you a different question anyway. So better to get down your key points in quite a precise way and then move on to the next one. Okay. All right. So that's one way of thinking about it. But again, think about it like the paragraphing, topic sentence, answer the question, give some more ideas, but always using, you know, it's speaking. So it's informal English. You're using colloquial terms. You're using idioms. You're using spoken linking phrases, not written ones. Okay, we're going to go through each one in turn, Alexis. Okay, so you'll see all of the different examples. Okay, so this is the question that we're going to work with first. Okay, and we're going to go through each one. There's some missing words, so if you can try and fill in the missing words, that would be great. So it's unhealthy and it should be a ban. So do you agree? Well, I agree to. Okay, perfect, to some extent. Okay, so partial agreement there. Okay, and then you go on immediately to give your reason. Okay, what's the reason for this? So how could you start that? You could continue with because, that's very true. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because, or yeah, firstly works as well if you were going to start a new sentence. Okay, so I think there is far too. Okay, very good, much. Just checking your grammar a little bit here. Sugar, okay. And then you give an example. So very nice, give a specific example related to this idea to back up. So okay, very good. For instance, or for example, oops, sorry. So you can say either of those. Always try and vary what you're saying. Always with IELTS, variety is very important. Okay. This is more like a general knowledge question than a grammar question. Anybody know how many? Whoa, we got a very big range there. 10, 20. It's actually apparently 40. Okay, 40 teaspoons of sugar in just one can. Yes. So stop drinking fizzy drinks. They're the worst things you can drink. Okay. No, it's true. It's true, I think. Yeah. So some fizzy drinks have over 40 teaspoons of sugar. So a nice specific example. Okay. But then you can also have a slightly different point of view. So you remember you've said, I agree to some extent. So on the side, sorry, on the side of banning it, you've got the amount of sugar. But yeah, okay, exactly. Very good, Neo. You're ahead of us. You know, on the other hand, and then you could give an argument why we shouldn't ban it. Yeah. Okay. So what do you think? What might be an argument for not banning fast food? It's delicious. Well, that is a good point. It's cheap. Oh yeah, on the flip side, Amal, very nice, very good, exactly for the speaking. Yeah, I think personal choice is what we're going for rather than it's very tasty. Okay, so people should be free to eat what they like, okay? All right. And then what's missing there? It does come in handy in dire need. You're absolutely right. Yeah, even if it's really unhealthy. Okay, so that's our alternative, is that you can put in, I mean, you're not going to use that always, but if you would like to give like two sides to the issue, then the alternative is the other side. Okay, so a reason for not banning fast food. Okay. But yeah, absolutely. I think you could say it's really delicious, so it's never going to happen. And then we bring it all together. Okay, very good for you. So overall, okay, it is unhealthy, but I don't think it should be banned. Okay, so just, you could sort of say, and ultimately it's up to the individual to take care of their health. Yeah. Okay. Or you might say, yes, very nice, Mukesh, life is precious and everybody should eat healthily. Okay. But you know, that's what, that's 4 sentences. It's a completely, you know, full answer. Nothing more needs to be added to that. Move on to the next question. Okay, so don't think you have to just keep going in part 3. Think complete, nice, you know, finished answer, rather than, oh my goodness, I need to just keep talking and talking and talking. Okay, so let's try doing the same thing, but with a different type of question. So what type of question is this? If you remember those 6 questions, good. Yeah, so this is giving reasons. Yeah, why do people go to different types of restaurants? So we're answering the question first of all. Okay, so I would say that it depends on the occasion. Okay, so you're giving an opinion and, you know, a reason there. Okay, so then you go into that in more detail because, okay, we don't want to repeat different, so maybe could we think of another way of saying, okay, yeah, so yeah, various types, certain types, things like that, you could say, for different reasons. And then again, go into the more specific. So we're kind of doing this, we're starting very general, then we move down to a specific example. It's a very nice way of structuring your answer. And I kind of, you can have in your head the image of a funnel going from sort of open down to very specific. Yeah, particular types, you could say that as well. So before we had, for example, here we're gonna, yeah, let's say, for instance, very nice for spoken English, wouldn't really want to use it in the writing. Okay, so what other special occasion might we talk about? Okay, perfect. Yeah, so wedding, anniversary, anything like that. Okay, so specific example. You might go to a more, okay, very good, Marty. You go to a fancy restaurant, a formal restaurant. Yeah, very exclusive, very nice. Yeah, very elegant. Okay, so we've gone for formal, classy, posh. These are all really good words. Chic, elegant, very nice. Okay. And then we change again. So we're talking about the special occasion. So how could we go from one side to the other? We haven't gone to the summary. Yeah, so on the other hand, or yeah, however, okay. If someone just wants to grab a, what's the expression here? Okay, very nice, a bite to eat. Okay, so again, we're using a colloquial expression here. Okay, they just go to a fast food place. So your alternatives, you know, you're looking at different aspects, different factors, and trying to give the examiner a range of ideas. Again, that makes it a complete answer. Okay. And then very quickly we summarize. So nothing else rather than overall? Yeah, okay. Yeah, remember we're going to keep this speaking, so not writing. So we don't really want to use words like conclusion. That's a written phrase. But yeah, you can say in general, Asma, or I'd say, I do, that's very nice, or basically, Remember these kind of words like basically, definitely, generally, they're very good for the speaking. Okay, so I think I wouldn't use sum up. Again, that's more of something that, you know, you would write. Yeah, okay, choice is very nice. The choice of restaurant depends on the person. Okay, so again, 4 sentences. It's a complete answer. You've looked at different aspects of it and then summarized. Okay, nothing more to say. Okay, so complete, think complete, don't think long. Okay, it's not the same. Okay, and we have, these are the other ones that we looked at. So if we look at the top one, which is more popular in your country, eating in a restaurant or cooking at home? Anybody like to write up? Okay, good. Yeah, so it's a comparison question. How might you start that if you had that question in the part 3? What might be your first sentence? Would it be like, yeah, you could say, I would say is always a nice way to start with the speaking. Yeah, it's a really good, or I'd say. Yeah, give me a complete sentence. Okay, it depends on people's choices. That's nice. Yeah. Okay. Okay, it's been on the increase, Tajiri. Very nice. Women in my country love to cook, so definitely at home. Yeah. Okay, yeah, for me is again, very nice way. So, you know, rather than saying in my opinion, which is it's a bit formal, but, you know, for me personally, I would say, I'd prefer, yeah, something like that. Okay. Okay. And then how might you give a reason for your first sentence? Oh, that's nice, Akeem. I've noticed. That's a very nice way of doing it. Okay. Okay. How could you continue? Okay, very nice, Alexis. So yeah, you're giving a reason. This is because, the reason for this is, yeah. Okay, or give some examples, Radoslava. So again, examples when you might cook at home, or certain people who might prefer eating in restaurants, certain people who might prefer cooking at home. And again, you know, give one idea and then give an alternative. These are the types of people who tend to eat in restaurants. These are the type of people who tend to eat at home. Okay, something like that. All right. What about the second one? What kind of question is that? Yeah, past and present. So again, it's a very, very common to talk about changes over time, like the past 30 years, the past 50 years. So how might we open our answer for this one? How would we begin? Or how would you like to begin that? Yeah, recently, Amana. Okay, or over time. Okay, what might you say about how has the type of food people eaten changed? It's drastically changed, or there's been a great change. Okay, absolutely, very good, Olivia. It's completely changed. Okay, very good. Any other information? Can you fill in your answer a little bit more? Okay, very nice, Janine. So we're more aware about our health these days. So, okay, changes in technology causing it. Very, very nice. Okay, good. And then the next one, what are some popular foods in your country? Okay, good. So you're describing. So tell us about some of the popular foods in your country. Can anyone tell me there? We always love this bit. Tell me what's okay, yeah, pho. I think it's pho, isn't it? Mansaf, rice. Okay, street food. You're gonna have to explain what a lot of these are, guys. Okay. I mean, not falafel. I know falafel. I know chicken biryani. Tabbouleh. Love tabbouleh. Oh my goodness, there was something coming up there. Okay, sushi, samosa. Oh my goodness, all this wonderful pearl milk tea. That sounds amazing. I've never even heard of that. Souvlaki, shawarma. Yes, I know, I'm sorry. Maybe we should move on from that. Kebab. Briannic, Kamsa. My goodness, I just want to eat all of this food. Pani puri and nasi goreng. I love those two dishes. Those are fantastic dishes. And couscous. Okay, I think we better stop there before everyone leaves and goes and cooks something, okay? So, Jamie, you feeling hungry? Unmute. Jamie, you're still muted. Can you unmute? I don't know what's going on. Oh dear. Okay, all right, let's, I'll take some questions until Jamie comes up. So let's have a look. He's cooking. Yeah, he got hungry, he's gone off.
Okay, I am back. So can you hear me now, Annelie?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Awesome,
Yeah, loud and clear.
Sorry, I could hear you there, but my screen had frozen, so I couldn't respond. I was tempted to go and do some cooking though, because some of those suggestions were fantastic. Yeah,
amazing.
Excellent. Yeah. So yeah, I'd just like to say a very big thank you, Annelie, for presenting today. Thanks for that, and thank you guys for your suggestions, especially for the food. I think we're both getting pretty hungry now. So yeah, as Annelie said, we'll have some time now to discuss any questions you have, whether it's general questions about IELTS or specific questions about the speaking test. If you can add your questions to the Q&A, we'll look at the questions there first. Before we do that, I'd just like to do a bit of promotion for our speaking and writing evaluation service. So this is something that we offer on our website, IELTSonlinetest.com. You can submit your writing and one of our trained examiners will review your writing and give you very detailed feedback on your performance, your strengths, your weaknesses, as well as an estimated band score. So that can be something really helpful for you to improve your writing. We offer a similar service with speaking as well. So if you're interested, I've put the link to that on the chat. You can find all the details on our website. So shall we dive in and take a look at some of these questions, Annelie? Great. So first question here is from Nuthanon. Nuthanon is asking, what should I do if I lose my confidence during the speaking test?
Yeah, that's a tough question, and it does happen. I think, again, if you try and think of the structure of the answers, you know, that's something to hang your answer on and just kind of go through it slowly. So think, okay, let me give my opinion first, then let me give me a reason for my opinion, let me give an example of that, and just, you know, take it calmly, you know, just try and control your breathing, because that always has a big impact. And just, you know, go slowly through it. It's normal to pause as well between sentences, you know, so just breathe calmly, pause between your sentences, and just try and remember those structures and just try and follow the structures. And then that gives you like a, you know, sort of a scaffolding or a structure to work on. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that as well. Just pausing, taking a breath, having a stretch as well can help. If you can control your body, then that can help you to settle down your mind as well. And Asim, I hope that helps to answer your question as well about nervousness. So let's see, quick question here from Alyssa. How many minutes are in part 2 of the test?
Okay, part 2. So you have 1 minute to make notes. Okay, the examiner will give you a card and some paper and a pencil. You got 1 minute to think about what you want to say. And then you should speak for 2 minutes. And the examiner will stop you after the 2 minutes. Okay, so you should really try and keep going until the examiner stops you. You don't have to finish. It doesn't matter, but you do need to produce 2 minutes of uninterrupted English that the examiner can then assess. And we do have other presentations related to the part 2 and taking notes and giving a long answer.
Yeah, and I'm just putting the links to them in the chat just now, so you'll be able to find them on our YouTube channel and also up on our Facebook page as well. So let's see, a question here from Mohammed about how can I manage the time? And I think for the speaking test, I don't think that is such an issue really for time management. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's really the responsibility of the examiner in the speaking test. They have to really keep control of the time. To be honest, you don't really need to worry about it. In the part 2, you should speak until the examiner stops you. In the part 3, like we said, give 4 or 5 sentences, try and make it a complete answer, and then move on to the next one. If the examiner wants to get more questions in, they might interrupt you in part 3. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything wrong or that that's a problem. You shouldn't worry about it. But, they have requirements that they have to fulfill, which is like a certain number of questions in each section. So they've got to think about that as well. But you really shouldn't worry if the examiner interrupts you. It just means that they want to get more questions in before the end of the test.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's great. I saw a question about that, whether it's okay if the examiner interrupts you mid-question, and I think that's completely normal. The examiner's often looking at the time. They might realize, okay, we need to move on, and they might cut you off, and that's no reflection on your speaking or your answer. It's just the way that they have to manage the time in the test. So don't worry if that happens. Great. A couple of good questions here about accent. So Tejiri is asking, do examiners take accent into consideration? And I can see Thomas is asking a question, do we need to speak with a British accent during the exam? So
no, you don't. You definitely don't. It's not about accent. It's about clarity of pronunciation. Okay, so you need to speak clearly and you need to be easy to understand, but that doesn't mean that you have to have a British accent or an American accent or any particular type of accent. It just means that you have to be easy to understand. The other part of pronunciation is intonation. So, you should put expression into your answers, stress the key words, pause between sentences. Don't run your sentences together, because that makes it very difficult for the examiner to follow the logic of your answer. But you don't need to have a British accent, no, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. You can see a question here from Nuthanon again. Could you give us some tips on part 1 and part 2? Nuthanon, that's quite general, and we do have a couple of other webinars focusing on part 1 and part 2 separately. So I've put the link to them in the chat. You can find them on our YouTube channel, and we've got lots of information there about those parts of the test. So you can check that out for a bit more detail. Question here from Adebowale, who is asking, how do we go about greeting the examiner in the speaking test? So they've said the salutation. I guess that's greeting the examiner at the beginning of the test.
Yeah, I mean, just normally, hello. That's all you need to say. The examiner will ask you to sit down. There's quite a sort of formal structure once he starts recording. He has a script he has to read out with his name or her name and the examiner number, the examiner center, and then they will ask you a couple of very quick introductory questions. Your full name, then what shall I call you, which is generally first name, but it depends on the culture, different cultures, different countries. They'll ask to see your ID. and then they will actually start the speaking test after that. So there is that kind of introductory part. But when you first enter the room, you know, just say hello. There won't really be any chance to say anything more than that. They'll go straight into the test.
Yeah, exactly. I'd agree with that. The first part of the test is designed as a kind of introduction, so you just need to say hello, and the examiner will do the rest. Okay, excellent. Let's see, a couple of questions here. One from Asma Gorani, who is asking, I would like to have some tips for reading. I got a really low score and I couldn't finish on time. Sorry to hear that, Asma Gorani. We do have a couple of webinars available on the reading test that can help you with different reading skills and time management as well in the reading test. We also have a series of videos on our website called IELTS Explained, which focuses on different question types in the reading test. I've put the link to that in the chat as well. If you're interested, you can take a look at the videos. It goes through different reading strategies and tips for improving your reading. You can also take a look at the webinars as well. They have a lot of useful information there. Okay. Let's see, good question here from Janir. Janir is asking, if we don't have any knowledge about the topic, how can we talk about it? So it's a good question.
Yeah, it is a good question. I mean, the first thing to say is these are not, you know, technical questions. They are very general questions about things like tourism, education, like those kind of questions about restaurants and healthy food. So they shouldn't be difficult ones to answer. But however, in terms of preparation, I think it's very good to read around the types of topics that come up in the speaking. They generally are the same as the topics that come up in writing. So, you know, you need it both. So education, tourism, work, family, technology, the environment, those kinds of topics, very likely to be asked about those. In either the speaking or the writing. So make sure you've got a good range of vocabulary that you need to know, but you know, it shouldn't be difficult. They are very general questions that you'll be asked.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Can you still hear me, Annelie? Sorry, my screen.
Yeah, no problem.
My screen just froze. So let's see. I can see a question here from Fathel Rahman. Could we give you some tips on listening? Fathel Rahman, we have the same video series available for listening as well. IELTS Explained on our website. You can check that out. It's a series of video lessons going through the listening test and explaining how to tackle different question types. So that could be helpful for you there. Okay. I can also see a question from Jabber asking, what idiomatic expressions do you recommend? And Jabber, we actually have a new webinar coming up in about a week, I think it is. I think it's next week on the 17th, focusing on advanced vocabulary for IELTS. One of the topics we're going to focus on is use of idioms. So if you check out the webinar, the lesson next Thursday, same time, we'll be going into that in a lot more detail because idioms is a very, you know, tricky topic. It can take a while to discuss. So I think Annelie will be telling us all about that next week. So, awesome. Right. Let's see. We have time for a couple more questions, guys, and then we will wrap up for today's session. So let's see. A question here from it's from Anonymous, who's asking, what should I do if I go blank and I take more time to get started? Is that a problem?
there are fillers. The best thing you can do in that case is just, say one of these standard fillers that we have, like, let me think about that for a moment, or, oh gosh, I haven't really thought about that before. And that does just give you a couple of seconds to, then gather your thoughts and move ahead. And like I was saying before, again, if you have a structure to follow, I think that really helps you, because you can just think, okay, my opinion, okay, reason, and that maybe will make it a little bit easier to think, because you've got a structure there rather than a blank page with no idea of how to start or how to continue.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, Alyssa. Nice to meet you. Thanks for joining us today. Hope to see you again. So yeah, I'd absolutely agree with that. And I'd also maybe say it's sometimes better, if you're not sure, just to pause before you answer. I think as an examiner, it's kind of better. It's okay if you just wait for a moment and then give your answer, rather than starting to speak and then having to go back and kind of rewind what you said. So that could be a good strategy for you. And a final question here is, sorry, I can't see your name, but if we don't understand the question and ask the examiner to repeat it, would we lose marks for that?
Not necessarily. I think if it was happening quite frequently, then, there would be an issue of comprehension. But, sometimes you're not sure, or you don't quite catch it. Just ask the examiner to repeat. I don't think that's going to be a problem. Just remember that in part 1, they can't change what they say. Okay, so they can only repeat. In part 3, they can rephrase. And there was a bit of a conversation on chat I just want to address about fluency. I think you're right, Vijaya. It's important to speak evenly and steadily and not too fast. Fluency doesn't mean just speaking really, really quickly, because that's quite confusing for the examiner. So think a good steady pace, and it's natural to pause between sentences. That really helps the examiner to be able to follow your answer. Okay.
Yeah, definitely, I'd agree. Right, guys. Well, I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap up for today. So I'm sorry if we didn't quite get round to your question in this session. You can add any questions you have to our YouTube channel as comments, or send them in via Facebook as well. We do check them, and we can get back to you that way as well. Otherwise, you can join us for another session in the next week or so. Okay. So I'd just like to say a very big thank you to Annelie for joining us today, for presenting. Thank you, Annelie.
Good luck to Jiri. He's got his test this weekend. Good luck.
Yeah, excellent. Best of luck to Jiri. Best of luck to all of you if you're planning to take your test soon. Hope you found the session helpful today, and yeah, we hope to see you again for another lesson soon. So thanks for joining us, and yeah, we'll see you soon. Thanks very much, Annelie.
Bye, guys. Bye. Take
Cheers.
care, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
This may take a while to actually close because my screen keeps freezing. So, yeah. We'll see. Yeah.
Maybe explain some of the meals you were talking about.
That's right. I need to decide what is going to be for tonight.
For dinner tonight.
Yeah, there are lots of options there. All right.
Pani puree, I think.
Yeah, I'll let you know what I opted for next time. See you guys. Bye-bye.